Hi, I'm James Davis, founder of Popski's Private Expeditions, and this is Shimmy. So this is also Shimmy, or Shimmy as it is at the moment. I had done a video not long ago out in the Tunisian desert talking about my 90 rebuild, Mad Jack, and all the things I'd done to it. And I'd mentioned there at the end of that video that now it was Shimmy's turn. So for those who don't know, Shimmy is my Series 3 lightweight. It's a 1982. It's a Dutchie, which means it's left-hand drive because it was made for the European military market. And I decided when I got back from Tunisia that I would strip down Shimmy and have a good look. And I had thought that the chassis was in pretty good shape and that the rest of it was in relatively good shape. I knew there were some things that needed doing, but having had a good look at it, now I'm not so confident. So I think it's Shimmy's turn for some rebuild and some TLC. So I'm trying to film this, and probably in the background you're going to hear some engine noise. That's actually Spitfire's aircraft. There's a small airfield nearby. They fly old World War II vintage aircraft out of. Typically, there's a twin-seater Spitfire, but there's some single-seaters, and there was a BF-109 last year, and we've had old P-51s and all sorts of warbirds flying overhead. And to be honest, I love the sound. And when I've got nothing else to do, I'll go out and you see them doing all sorts of aerobatics up above our village, which is kind of a nice background atmosphere. So anyway, one of the things I wanted to talk about was the Shimmy rebuild. And so one of the things that when I was talking about rebuilding Shimmy or doing some work on it, I get a lot of different opinions. So one think I should be reconditioning Shimmy, so taking it back to its original style. Now that's sadly not going to happen. If I wanted to do that with the current chassis, get the chassis all welded up, all the big holes you saw in it dealt with, do a chassis treatment on it, I could possibly do that. The bulkhead is probably more body filler now than actual steel. It's just rusting, and the rust is kind of pushing out, and it's in pretty sorry state. So and then I've had others suggest, well, you could put in a V8 engine, or you could do all these things that other people do with trucks. So as in many things we do with Popskis, I go back to my military sort of days and the way the military approaches things. So when the military is looking at a vehicle, the first thing they do is they put together a requirement. So what is Shimmy going to be required to do? Well, that's kind of simple. It's going to have to undertake long distance travel, not just out in the desert, but in transit. So just to drive from here down through to the bottom of Tunisia where we reach the edge of the desert, or longer trips like Algeria, you know, we're talking about 1,000, 1,500 miles just there of highway, motorway travel. And so Shimmy has to be able to operate at motorway speeds, keep up with the newer vehicles, and do it in a way that's not going to put undue stress on the drivetrain. So that's a requirement. A second requirement is that it has to be reliable. It has to be able to do these long distance trips without major breakdowns. As great as our mechanics, Bill and Mick and the rest are, and I've given them some really creative challenges, like on the last Tunisia trip, the camshaft timing sprocket basically decided to shatter inside the timing case housing, and it caused all sorts of damage, and the camshaft was pushed out of place, and there was bits and pieces and cracks, and the seals were gone. And out in the middle of the desert, in a bit of a sandstorm, Bill and Mick, with a bit of help from some of the rest of the guys, put it all back together, and it actually ran even better on the way home than it did on the way out. But over the long term, we need reliability. So the decision on the engine, the decision on the rest of the drivetrain is going to be based on that requirement, reliability. So what else do we need from it? Well, it needs to be easy to strip down. It needs to be friendly for filming, so it needs to be set up as a camera vehicle with lots of camera mounting points, because everyone does like to see us video our expeditions. It needs to be able to carry a fair amount of weight in the back. So the choice of suspension on the last trip, you'll probably see that the rear end of Shimmy, with all the jerry cans of water and everything, and food and cooking gear and spare parts and tools and everything loaded in the back, along with personal gear and a spare tire, was a bit too much for the suspension, and it had a real droop in the back. Now, in one way, that's not a big deal, but it also reduces the amount of suspension travel you have and the number of times your rear axle is going to slam into your bump stops when going over rough ground. So we don't want to get a great deal of lift on it, because then it might become unstable both on the motorway but also in the desert. Your center of gravity shifts. But we do want it to be able to sit flat and level with a reasonable amount of ground clearance. And so one of the problems with the older Land Rovers, including Shimmy, is braking. So it has drum brakes on all 4 axles. I don't really have a problem with drum brakes, but ideally we would upgrade to disc brakes on at least the front axle. But with Shimmy, driving normally is fine, but if you had to stop quickly, especially from high speed, you basically have to stand on the brakes and put all your weight on them to get enough braking power to slow the vehicle. And that is kind of dangerous over the long term. So going to be doing some thinking about that. There's a requirement for ergonomics, so it needs to be comfortable for all these long distance trips. So anyway, I'm working on a list of requirements, and based on that list of requirements, this is how we're going to proceed with the Shimmy rebuild. So anyway, stay tuned. And I hope you enjoy following me along. I will be looking at all your comments, so if anyone knows of anything, a supplier for a certain type of part that I've been trying to find, if you have suggestions, feel free to drop them in the comments, and I will definitely have a look. And yeah, we'll see what we come up with. When Shimmy is going to Algeria this year, I've got a driver lined up for it. It's going to come as our camera vehicle, and so it needs to be ready by about the beginning of September, so we have at least a month or 2 to test it, make sure everything's working reliably and no major issues before we set off for Algeria. So yeah, I have a deadline, which is always good when you're doing a project like this. So yeah, all right, so let's get on with the Shimmy rebuild.